right, guys.
All right. Well,
We
since I
are.
did one, why don't I get started? So
Sounds
one is present a website blog video that provides a poor application of transfer in relation to learning a skill. So I'm just going to share real quickly here, and then I'll show you what I was looking at. This is actually a site that Dr. M shared with me from his experience in running, and it is the pose method of, can you all see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not going to play all the videos, but I thought what was really interesting here, there's some really good fundamentals of, kind of conserving energy and running. But one of the things that kind of stood out is when they go through the video, particularly, it's kind of noted here, it's in essence these three different poses, right? So from a motor learning standpoint, there was nothing really that tied them all together, right? It just felt very herky jerky, right? So here's a pose, and then here's a pose, and then here's a pose. Well, how do we kind of tie that all together? The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and they mention it in this second video, is they say, well, sprinting is no different than running or than jogging, right? And watch an Olympic runner versus an Olympic marathoner. Obviously, it's very, very two different forms. Sprinting to first base and needing to complete, 26 miles or 100 miles or 50 miles, very, very different. So I thought that was a really kind of poor application. I think, especially when you're looking at something that's probably oriented towards new runners, right? Just when a sprinter comes out of the blocks, the lowness, staying low, keeping that body angle low, the arm movement of a sprinter, right? You can use your arms to pull you when you're sprinting, that shorter distance. This motion is very, very inefficient for an endurance runner. You're wasting energy, right? And all that energy you waste will hurt you in the end. So, and the other thing that I thought was really, really interesting about this is at no time from a motor learning standpoint, does it address that, the arm movement, the upper body movement. It doesn't address that really at all. It just kind of goes into these three poses that we saw before. So from a motor learning perspective, I feel like the lower body's kind of herky jerky, and from an upper body perspective, it really doesn't, in my opinion, kind of address it at all. I mean, what are the hips doing? What are the shoulders doing? What are the arms doing? Even here in this drawing, it doesn't even really look at what is the head doing. In my opinion, just this drawing, the head would be a little bit far back. So I think in particular, when you're looking at something that's oriented towards new runners, there's some fundamental things that I think could help new runners really save energy, avoid injury. For example, the midfoot or the forefoot fall, they do address, but ultimately, some things that could ultimately steer them in the wrong direction, I think, from a motor learning standpoint.
Did they really say that jogging and running or sprinting and jogging are the same thing? Did they make that comparison in that blog?
Yeah. Oh, here, let me, it is.
I'm curious to see the wording.
Yeah, it is nuts. Here, let me, I'm gonna share again. I had it queued up right to that spot on the video. Give me 1 second here. I think I did it. I had two screens. Oh yeah, here we go.
Oh, that sprinter is making me so bad.
Oh, what'd you say?
The drawing of the sprinter.
Oh yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. So they do address the foot strike, but even here, when they talk about a sprinter and a jogger, I mean, this foot placement or this rise on an endurance runner, it's completely inefficient. If you're sprinting it out to first base, fine, but you don't need to be almost kicking your butt when you're doing it anyway. So, but yes. So can you imagine you know, someone sprinting for them, like going out to a marathon and trying to like, you know, sprint out 26 miles, they'd kill themselves.
I'm getting rhabdo. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, that's dumb. Another one that comes to mind for me, it's a similar thing. It's like a teaching an optimal movement pattern. That's what it seems like the pose thing is GOATA, if you guys have heard of that.
Oh yeah.
Stands for greatest of all time athletes or greatest of all time action, either or. And they're all like, I don't hate their stuff, but they are completely against the weight room. They're completely against most what you'd call traditional strength and conditioning, and they're all just biomechanics and like hitting on the outside edge of your foot. And it's the argument for some of their stuff is good, but I just don't like extreme perspectives on this type of stuff, you know, like even the perspective of falling when you're running, like, is it a controlled fall? I don't know. That's a weird way that sounds like every step should be really hard. No, like you can make running a beautiful, efficient movement. It doesn't need to be
Right.
a fall. But yeah, I just think absolutes in these
Yeah.
types of arguments, like you need to move this way. I don't think that's a good way to go most of the time.
Right.
I just learned about the greatest of all athletes of all time or whatever, that website, and I was like, what is it? Like, I was like, is this a cult? I'm not really sure. It was, yeah, but it was, yeah, there was some good information, but at the same time, yeah, it was a little just like extreme in that there's only one way to do it, and if you're doing it any other way, you're basically just like destroying your own body.
Right.
Yeah.
Doug, I have a
Well,
question. So I remember in I forget if it was maybe biomechanics or something, we learned a little bit about like we like broke down like the biomechanics of like sprinting versus running. And like I remember, like you were saying, like they're talking about the controlled fall, but actually at the peak, I think it was like the peak acceleration or velocity of a sprint, the body should be vertical. So you're starting like when you're accelerating,
Right.
your body's tilted forward. At your peak velocity, you're actually upright to maximize your stride length.
Yep.
So like just like thinking about practice and things like that, like I mean, you're working with cross country athletes, so they're never probably doing all out sprints when they're performing, but do you practice that? Like, do you guys practice those like all out sprint drills, and like how does that translate over to their like performance?
Yeah, absolutely. We do practice sprinting because ultimately, you know, the beginning of the run and the end of a run, we are going to a full out sprint. And I think, you know, the most important piece being at the start line. You know, you have 200 athletes, 250 athletes. In this case, last weekend we had 290 athletes that are going to be condensed down into a space that's 8 feet wide. So the starting sprint is very, very important, but in my opinion, inefficient as you you know, get into kind of that endurance or that maximum speed phase of it. So yeah, we do practice that. Obviously, getting into a full sprint at the end of a race is more difficult, right? They're already tired, but having that kind of change of mind, change almost. You know, we always mark a spot on the course. Okay, this is where we're going to start to kick, and you know, really trying to get kind of back into that full kick. It's harder to kind of get into that forward lean at that stage of the race, but from, you know, the starting gate and the gun, we practice that a lot, and we do that through you know, drills, games. We play a tic-tac-toe game that's pretty fun.
Well, I'm thinking too that like if they are learning the mechanics of it, then even, you know, say at the end of the race when they're under fatigue, they can still like fall back on what they know, like the biomechanics of it.